You are listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for Auburn and the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul.
Kurt, Nate, Coach Daff, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Now takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Lutz and Kirkland. Touchdown, Auburn!
Think about it. It's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
They have the most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown, Tiger.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Jboy Show, your favorite new SEC sports podcast. And very excited to be joined by a man that wears many hats. I call him the Bruce Wayne of college basketball. You can find him on his Marching to Madness and Clutch Points NFL podcast as well. Also doing some writing for Heat Check College Basketball. You can find them at Heat Check CBB. And that's Mr. Blake Lovell. Blake, what is up, dog?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jake, man. I wanted to say this off the top. Someone who, I don't know, it feels like I started podcasting many years ago now. I feel like I'm getting older, but buddy, let me tell you, you're doing a great job. You kind of, I think, are doing at least what I tried to do when I started out. Let me tell you, it doesn't go unnoticed, man. You're working hard. It's paying off. So.
Well, Blake, I really appreciate that, man. And coming from a guy like you, a verified guy like you that's been through it, been through the wars, been through the battles, I really appreciate that, man. And I can't wait to get you on here multiple times because you're a guy that knows what's going on. You know what's going on behind the scenes, and you got a real good feel for kind of the direction that things are going. And kind of in that vein, and me and you kind of talked about it a little bit on the pre-show, with all this G League stuff, and obviously Jonathan Kuminga is making his decision June 22nd. How do you feel? Do you feel like they're going to make a trade for the one and done, but make the G League a farm system?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think everyone kind of looks at it at this point where, we look at this one and done situation. I've always been one of the people that said I think it's one of the most silliest rules that's ever been invented. I just have never seen the need for it. And now, you kind of look at what they're doing with the G League. It's almost like, well, hey, we kind of realize the ridiculousness of this one and done rule, and so maybe this is a better pathway. And look, I'll give them credit. I'll say this because, look, it hasn't always been the best option, I think, for kids coming out of high school as long as this one and done rule's been there. Just to throw them into a potential G League situation where, there's been a lot of good coaches, there's been good development, but at the same time, it's something that's needed a little bit more. And I think that's what they're doing now with the way they've kind of revamped things. And I think it offers more possibilities. You're having guys that are coming in, that they're getting more than just basketball. Like there are lots of other things that are going into it. And I mean, it's going to make it interesting, I think, for college coaches, no doubt, especially the ones that are going after these top tier players. But at the same time, I think if you're one of these people, which we saw, Jake, right away, I mean, you had some national media people who came out right away and said, oh, this is it for college basketball. Yep. It's done. There's no chance. I think that's also pretty silly because it's not like, a high 3-star or low 4-star guy is going to be going this route every single season. You're going to lose some guys, but the majority of the guys are still going to go play college basketball.
Definitely. And I kind of think of it, Blake, and I may be wrong because, again, the more nuanced part of it than I do when it comes to this basketball recruiting situation. I kind of mirror it to college baseball a little bit because if you look at the decisions that these kids are having to make, and most of them, and it's kind of different, especially with that amount of rounds in the draft, but you're having to make a decision between amateur and professional and kind of deciding, what path do I think is the best for me, athletically, academically, and all that. My question, Blake, is do you think if I just take, for example, the top 100 players, just to use a nice even number, do you think that the G League per year will get 10 out of those 100 top 100 players, or do you think it's possibly more?
I think 10 is probably the most realistic part of that. If it is more, I don't think it's many more because I just think it's one of those two where we're looking at all these guys, Jalen Green and such. I think this is an experiment. I mean, like it or not, it's something where this looks great on paper, but at the end of the day, I think these are sort of the guinea pigs when it comes to the guys who are going to go through this process. And then, the guys who follow are going to be able to look at this and say, hey, this is a situation, where either these guys succeeded or they failed. And I think that's going to push it one way or the other. So I think there's a certain sense that this is just automatically going to work. And every single year, you're going to have a certain amount of people that are going to go. And I really think it depends on what we see from these first couple of years of it and maybe how these guys are getting acclimated to the league. And ultimately, they're going to talk. They're going to say, hey, this was the thing that worked. And yes, they may not come out and talk about all the things that maybe didn't work so well. But we're going to know at least, I think, from both an on-court standpoint and off-the-court standpoint, what these guys thought of this process. Was it something that they thought ultimately was the right thing to do? Or, if we see them go to the NBA, and we have to remember, too, a lot of these guys are probably guys who are going to the top 10 or so of the NBA draft the following year. So it's not like these guys are just going to get picked in the second round. So it does make it a very unique case, and that's why I think the number of guys that are going to be in this situation where we're even talking about it, going to be very low. All things considered, when you compare how many guys are committing to schools each year.
Yeah, I think you're right on the answer there. And kind of last question on this subject, Blake, because it's interesting to me as a former coach. And anytime there's rule changes or something like this, it obviously affects the head coaches abruptly. Do you kind of have a sense? Are most coaches, obviously deep down, they wish it didn't happen, but are most of them taking this in stride, or are you sensing a lot of backlash? Like there could be some sort of kind of not war brewing, but disruption brewing between what the G League's doing and the head coaches at the top levels of the NCAA?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are still kind of in that wait-and-see approach. I don't think there's anyone that's just out there looking at it and saying, this is just something that we have to immediately find a way to squash. I just think that they're looking at it maybe kind of what we just talked about in that, let's see how this goes. Let's see what the huge impact of this ultimately is. Because, again, it's not like at least this year, we haven't seen 15, 20 different players all of a sudden just up and leave where they were and decided to go this route. So it's going to affect a smaller probably amount of coaches. And, of course, the guys who are out there, knowing that they're not going to recruit these very, very top 5 players anyways, it doesn't necessarily affect them. And so I think ultimately they're probably in that wait and see mode. Sure, I think coaches around the country would love to have these top players, and college basketball would love to have these players. We'd love to see these guys in the NCAA tournament, but the NCAA tournament is going to go on. You're still going to have a lot of talented players in there, and I think it's just one of those where maybe there's a little bit of we're not sure how this is going to unfold. How is this going to affect us? Maybe just that from a very short-term impact. But I think the long-term impact of this, we probably won't even know, honestly, for a little while.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, I think the word you used, experiment, is the perfect word because that's really what it is. And there seems to be a lot of that going around lately. But kind of moving to on the floor and looking, I know we're a long way from next season, but you can kind of start to see the teams taking shape. And I really want to stick in the SEC, Blake. Are there, and I've asked Jimmy Dykes this, I talked with Corey Evans about this. I see the SEC and I see the rise to prominence in college basketball, and you can really see it throughout the league. My question to you is, Blake, do you think 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're going to have a top-heavy SEC league? Or do you look around now at the coaches, the Musselmans at Arkansas? I mean, obviously you got Pearl at Auburn, Oates at Alabama, Buzz Williams at Texas A&M, Rick Barnes at Tennessee, and the list goes on and on. Do you think the SEC is about to be as deep as it has ever been on the hardwood in the history of the conference?
Yeah, it's kind of been going that direction, and I think it's ultimately, it does come down to coaching to me. Whereas, if you look around at the coaches that are in the league right now, if we assume that most of these guys are going to be hanging around for a while, because let's say, I don't even know what era you could look at, but there was a point where it was like, okay, everyone wanted to try to get to the ACC. Like we wanted to try to get to those top tier schools in the ACC. That was seen as sort of that conference that you look at, and even the Big Ten. Like, there's been a lot of good Big Ten teams over the years. And the SEC, had some down years. And I think it was ultimately maybe coaches would come to the SEC and get their jobs, maybe something like that. Mm-hmm. But now the SEC is like the place to be. Like, that's where you want to go. You've got the network. You've got all these resources and money that maybe weren't there. I think the coaching roster is as good as it's ever been. And so when you look at it that way, I don't think there's any doubt when you kind of look at the trajectory of the SEC, it should be a league where every single year in the tournament you're getting 17. You should be getting half your league in at this point, I think, because of the recruiting classes, all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's going to make it to where it's, you may have an Eric Musselman, a Nate Oates, or Buzz Williams that are finishing 8th or 9th in the SEC.
Yeah, Jerry Stackhouse.
Yeah, exactly. You've got Stackhouse there. And so it's just that's what I always say when I do this every year. It's like you put together power rankings and all that. Of course, we do it for fun. We have no idea. We're just having fun with it, making predictions. Somebody's got to finish 1 through 14, and it's not always going to be something where it's just going to fit with a coach's resume. Mm-hmm. Like, there are going to be really good coaches that may finish a lot lower than guys that maybe are newer, don't have the same type of pedigree. But that's just the way it is now. It's gotten so competitive. And so I don't think that, as long as the SEC has the network, as long as it's a case where you have all these resources that are getting pumped into it, I just think there's always going to be great coaching now moving forward. And I think you should probably get at least 7 teams in.
Exactly. I think 7's a great number. I think 7 is a number that, should be shot for at least every year by the SEC. But really kind of looking at Auburn and Alabama a little bit here, Blake. You've got Nate Oates on one side, you've got Bruce Pearl on the other. So, you've got high quality coaches, high quality recruiters. Is there a world that you can see the Iron Bowl in basketball? It will never be as big as football. I understand that. But getting to a point where the fever pitch, it's already a great rivalry in basketball, but getting to a point where there's a fever pitch, and now Auburn and Alabama is being talked about as some of the biggest rivalries around the country, because it could be that just with the passion.
Yeah, and I think, like you're saying, it's just, I think you're seeing this where it's something where fans have kind of been, itching for that success. And of course, Auburn has gotten there quicker because of what they've been able to, accomplish over the past couple of years. The Final Four, winning an SEC regular season title, winning the tournament. Like, there's all kinds of things that Auburn has achieved. And as we know, Jake, which, being around, that state, when one does something really well, the other wants to catch up and move past.
Yin and yang.
Right? That's how it works. So I think now, that we've seen Auburn have the success, it's where, okay, Alabama goes out, they hire Nate Oates, who, for my money, I think he's excellent.
I think he is too.
Exactly what they need. He brings a style that they need. I'm not saying he's Bruce Pearl, but he's someone that runs a very appealing style of play, and I think that's something that's going to help Alabama in the long term, and it's already paying off in the short term. But at the same time, you still got to win games, and so I think that's where it comes down to. Like, for Alabama, and I've said this many times throughout this offseason, as weird as it's been, I still think that this has to be that year that they take that step forward, and then once they do, you can't go back to where you're just, you're losing 15 games every year. You're winning, you're going 19 and 15, 20 and 14, whatever. Like, you have to take that next step. You have to start winning 24, 25, 20. Like, you have to start that trajectory. And I think they have the talent to do that. And if they can get to that point to where they're doing that consistently, and they're not just being that team that's always in the middle of the pack, I think Alabama and Auburn on the floor is just, they're going to be, as long as they have those two coaches there, they're going to be two of the better teams in the SEC, or at least they should be. And I think obviously that makes the rivalry much more fun. It makes it a much more national thing, just because those should be top 25 teams every year.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction. I literally think, and I may be crazy, Blake, that within the next 3 years, College Game Day will be at an Auburn-Alabama basketball game. I really feel that it could be that type of momentum around it. And kind of looking at the rest of the SEC, you have Andrew Nembhard leaving Florida. That shocked me, Blake, because I know he's a huge piece of what Mike White and them were trying to do down in Gainesville heading into next year. Do you have any background on that? Was it just a bad fit?
Well, I think ultimately it came down to fit. I was surprised too. Like, I had heard things about, look, we think he's not going to stay in the draft. And so when you hear that, it's like, okay, we just assume that means he's coming back to Florida. But of course, there was someone that was like, well, he's not saying the draft, but I'm also not saying he's coming back to Florida. And that's well, that's interesting. And then, of course, it came out that he's ultimately transferring. I don't know if the style's messed, and I think, honestly, that's the one thing that, quite frankly, could be holding Mike White back a bit at Florida, because I don't think they run that. We just talked about Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl. Florida runs an opposite style. Like they are very methodical.
Yeah, they're set oriented.
Yeah, it's just sort of, you look at their tempo, you go to Ken Palm, they're in the 300s, and like that's how it works. But the problem is, they haven't been like a Villanova who runs that type of style, and they kind of have those pieces in place that seem to fit it. Mm. It's almost like they've recruited a lot of good players, but they don't necessarily fit how they play. And so I think that's something that may go into it a little bit with Nembhard leaving. That, to me, tells me that someone like Trey Mann, which I think we expect him to come back, he's going to if they try to push forward a little bit, maybe up the tempo a bit, I think it's going to be fine, because I think Florida's got a lot of talent, but they're one of those too where I've gotten to the point with Florida where it's hard to trust them every single year. Yeah. And I think that this is one where you look at this season, we don't know the circumstances surrounding it, and I think that's going to make it a lot more interesting when it comes to coaching changes, period. Mm-hmm. But, if Florida struggles this season, and let's say that they finish middle of the pack in the SEC, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, I'm not sure, because there's already a lot of pressure, I think, on Mike White there. There's a lot of unhappy fans. And fair or unfair, when you follow Billy Donovan, the expectations are really high, and I'm not exactly sure where it goes from here with Florida. But they need to win some games, and they probably need to win some games pretty quick. Yeah, that was actually my next question. I was going to ask you if Mike White's in trouble, because there was talk last year, especially when they started struggling, that he could be on the hot seat, and then you throw in losing Nembhard. So again, it looks like it's going to be an uphill battle in a place that expects to win in basketball, and that has won, obviously, the run with Joakim Noah and Corey Brewer and all those guys. But I want to kind of talk to you for a second, because there's, the huge hoopla about Jonathan Kuminga and where he's going. And I know it kind of curtails back to the G League that we were kind of talking about earlier, but, we've thrown out a prediction. We're expecting him to go professional. I'm wondering, have you heard anything different? Do you have any new things to bring to light, or are you kind of in that same camp? Listen, I mean, you guys are batting a high percentage. So whatever I say, it doesn't. Why does anyone listen to me? Like, they should listen to you guys. I appreciate that. Yeah, well, it's one of those, and we talked about it earlier. I mean, I would be surprised if he goes anywhere else other than to the pro route, to the G League. Like, I just think that it's something that makes a lot of sense for him. He is that guy we're talking about when it comes to someone that you look at the system on paper and how does it fit a player and what his trajectory is going to be in the NBA. Like, he is a future top pick type of guy. Without a doubt. Yeah, and I think that's why, when we make those arguments about why, the G League makes sense, why maybe it doesn't make sense, he's one to me that I would make the argument for probably 7 days a week that, hey, man, look, it makes sense. Yeah, you need to go. You need to go. Yeah, exactly. You're one of those guys that they created this thing for you. Like, you're the type of guy that has the skill, you have the talent, you have the potential, and so they would make sense. And so I really would. I'd be surprised if he did anything else. I always say this with everyone, but it's like, look, man, you never know about kids. Like, sometimes they change their minds. You don't know. But at the end of the day, I just think it's something that I'd love to see him playing in the SEC. I just think that it makes too much sense for him not to go that route. I agree 100%. And I think it's a smart move, just like I thought it was for Jalen Green. Thought it was the smart move. I mean, I remember the 18-year-old me, and if you would have told me that you would pay me that amount of money to do what I love to do, it'd be very, very hard for me to turn down. But really, kind of in closing, Blake, and just with all the scandals and stuff that have gone on in college basketball, and they're still with the Will Wades and stuff. My question is, you just see what happened at Oklahoma State, and they get the 1 year. I know they're appealing it and all that. I look at them and I say, okay, they have one level 5 violation. Kansas has 5. So
is Kansas just going to have to make all their players go to Kansas State? Or, I mean, what can they do? What do you do with 5?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when it comes to the NCAA, anyone listening to this that's listened to me before knows that, I'm not getting Christmas cards from the NCAA.
Yeah, I don't think I will either.
Yeah, it's. I mean, here's the deal. I think when it comes down to all this, it's something where ultimately this is in the hands of the NCAA, and when anything is in the hands of the NCAA, I wish I knew what the ruling was going to be, because they don't always make sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of this started, or at least, I mean, this has been going on for years, but I think a lot of this started with some of these waivers, for transfers and everything. When we started to see just a weird deal around maybe why some players got a waiver, some players don't get a waiver. I think that's when you start to dig deeper and like, well, how does the NCAA make some of these decisions, and where is the consistency on it?
Yeah.
Because look, I mean, I've got nothing against, any of these coaches and all that, and we talked about the FBI investigation. Here's the deal with Oklahoma State. How new is any of this information? It's been out there for years now. Like, it feels like this thing's been dragging on for a century.
And it didn't help them on the floor, Blake. It didn't help them on the floor.
That's the thing. It's like, there's no new information here, but yet for the NCAA, we're going to go out and give you a postseason ban this season. We're going to give you the ruling in June. Like, there's no connection for me. And you can say, well, they broke the rules. They've got to get punished for it. Okay, that's great. But, like, where is the consistency? Like, are we going to come out in November and say, all right, Arizona, we are going to do this to you after the season's already started and all that? Like, I get it. I mean, we don't want to hear coaches, on wiretaps offering money and everything. I get it. We don't want to hear that. But at the same time, it's like, man, some of this stuff is just there's no consistency with the NCAA. And I think until there is, it's really hard to know ever what they're going to do in a lot of these situations.
That's a great point. There is no consistency in any sport. It's across the board. I think they don't understand timing, which shocks me. My thing is, I feel like that every vote, like when this comes down to it, I feel like the people that are on the board, and you don't have to give them an address or where they live, but whoever votes in one way, it should be made public. I feel like that's the only way you're going to hold them accountable. Referees, when they screw up, everybody in the world sees it. And when a coach screws up and a player screws up, everybody in the world sees it. But these are the people sitting on the top of the ivory tower that can hide behind the Wizard of Oz glass and just divvy out punishment however they seem fit. Because in my opinion, and this is just me, Blake, if they give that to Oklahoma State and they don't handle their business at least adequately or appropriately with Bill Self in Kansas, there's going to be a lot of problems in the bureaucracy that goes between college basketball and the NCAA, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's just one where, if you go back to the quote from the late Jerry Tarkanian, where, he talks about how, the NCAA was so mad at Kentucky that they gave Cleveland State, 2 more years of probation.
Yeah.
That's kind of, that's just one of those. And people use that all the time now because it seems that way. It's like, okay, Oklahoma State getting a postseason ban, we're going to give Kansas an extra scholarship. Like, it's one of those things. And of course, we're laughing about this and we're being sarcastic, but at the same time, you never know.
No, it's true. Well, they say that NCAA stands for Nobody Cares About Athletes. So, it's
I don't know, man. I know they've got a hard job, but it's something too where it's like, I don't know. At the end of the day, this whole FBI investigation, what did it really do? What did it really?
Yeah. It got views on a documentary, Blake. It got views on a documentary. That's what it got.
Yeah. I mean, we already knew this stuff was going on, and I know some people have kind of said, look, it's not like, that there's anything just completely over the top. I mean, this is, like it or not, this is stuff that's gone on for many, many years, for, previous staffs, you name it. Like, I'm not saying it goes on everywhere, because it doesn't go on everywhere, but it's stuff that's going on, and it's just the fact of acting like now we care all of a sudden. Because it's more public, and I think that's something too that's kind of interesting to me.
Definitely. And Blake, I really appreciate your time, man. You're a guy. Tell everybody where they can follow you, because you're a great follow on Twitter, an unbelievable writer. If you care about college basketball at all, if you really want to know what's going on, this is a guy you need to follow. You need to listen to his podcast as well. Blake, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jake. Like you said, Marching to Madness, that's the podcast we've been doing for about 4.5 years. We've had hundreds of coaches on from all across the country. We're planning on doing some expansion with that, so we're going to have some more stuff coming to the network there on Marching to Madness. Should be a lot of fun for college basketball fans. And then, Blue Ribbon College Basketball Yearbook, obviously the one that comes out every year, the most information you'll find on every team around the country. We do that. Comes out in September, early October. So look forward to that, and Check CBB.com, all kinds of stuff. So you can find the rest of my stuff on Twitter at the Blake Lovell.
Awesome, Blake. Well, I appreciate it again, man, and we'd love to have you back on, especially as it gets closer to the season, and keep talking some college hoops with you, brother.
Sounds great, my friend. Thanks for having me.
All right, Blake, be good.
Thanks.
All right, everybody, and that was Blake Lovell, one of my personal favorites, stand-up guy, very knowledgeable about college basketball. If I ever have a question, about anything that's going on, Blake's one of the first people I hit up. Again, just a solid all-around dude, just like a lot of people we have on this show. And again, want to thank you guys again, as usual, for checking us out on this edition. And remember, you can find us on Twitter at The Jboy Show, on Instagram at The Jboy Show, on Facebook. We have The Jboy Show page. We're also on YouTube, and anywhere you get your podcasts, whether it be Apple, Spotify, does not matter. Always a special shout out to Faison, the guy in the studio, and the Investor Brand Network, Michael McCarthy, the CEO, and everybody there does an unbelievable job with PR and marketing. They made my new logo, which if you can check out, I hope you guys like, even though it has my face on it. But again, at the end of the day, you guys make this thing happen. We're one big family here, and we want to keep adding. So tell your friends. And again, we got some big news coming about some guests. So we have Coach Chad Pruitt from Auburn men's basketball, the assistant coach and director of operations, coming on next Monday, and another guy you may know coming on next week, and we'll announce that soon. But thanks again for checking us out. Jboy is going.